Was Cataclysm actually that bad? Let's find out.
Features and decisions of the Cataclysm expansion have been controversial, but WoW's third expansion was also not without its positives. Today, we'll look at over 10 different things that made WoW a better game that were added in Cataclysm. And at number 10, we have Void Storage. Implemented in patch 4.3, Void Storage serves as an alternative to the traditional bank. Run by Vault Keepers, Void Storage in lore is made possible by ethereals using technomancy, which allows players to deposit some of their items in a pocket dimension. Originally,
Okay.
Void Storage had 80 slots, but that was doubled to 116 Warlords of Draenor.
So, it's literally just a bank. You're telling me Blizzard already, from Cataclysm, was in the business of selling you bug fixes as expansion big points? Because this is just a bank expansion, like, really? You're just calling it Void Storage and calling it a new mechanic? What is this if not a bank?
Access Void
Jeez.
Storage, players must pay a 100 gold fee once per each character. Depositing
Okay.
items into Void Storage cost 25 gold in cata, but was later lowered to 10 in WoD. Void Elves actually receive a 50% discount on transactions at Void Storage.
Okay, so it's a real bank this time. Okay, not a fictional bank, but this is more like a real bank. Got it.
Storage due to the racial passive ethereal connections. Void Storage was initially almost exclusively used for transmog, but we'll get to that later. There are two main advantages to Void Storage. First, it can save up space in both the player's bags and the regular bank. Second, Void Storage is account-wide, meaning any character can access it once they have paid the 100 gold fee. However, Void Storage is at number 10 on this list because it has so many disadvantages as well, which result in
gold.
Void Storage feeling pretty underwhelming and frustrating. Most of these disadvantages have to deal with the stuff you actually can put into Void Storage, or more accurately, stuff that you can't put into Void Storage. First, players
It looks like you just can't put in cloth and things like that. Is that gonna be it? I didn't play this expansion, but it looks like that's gonna be the case, right?
can only place soulbound items into Void Storage.
Oh.
They cannot
That's
also
the same
deposit
thing,
unique
honestly.
items that are stackable, or any items that are common or poor quality. Items must be also fully repaired before they can be deposited. Additionally, any items placed into the storage will lose all customizations, including enchants, gems, additional sockets, reforged stats, and creator tags on crafted items.
Okay.
This is because the storage system only keeps a record of the item's ID number for the sake of technical efficiency. Finally, there are just very few Void Storage locations in the game. As a Dragonflight, there are only 10 in the entire game, with most being in major cities. All of these
Okay.
downsides quickly add up and place Void Storage
Dude, I played Shadowlands for a bit. I did not even know this is a thing. Wow.
at only number 10 on this list. Up next, number 9, we have the updates to cities. Both Stormwind and Orgrimmar received
Okay.
massive updates in Cataclysm, including a total revamp and additional areas in both cities being added. The Stormwind Outskirts and Cemetery were added in Stormwind, while Orgrimmar was also greatly expanded with the Valley of Honor update and now having a backdoor to Ajara.
True, that's
Both
cool.
capitals also received little portal areas for the new Cataclysm zones, which are the Throne of Elements in Orgrimmar and Earthshrine in Stormwind. There are simply so many things to list and go over with complete revamps of both cities that we can't include them on this list. However, we did do a mini review of all these changes in the video covering the changes to Storm and Orgrimmar over the years, which can be found in a linked video in the description below if you want to check it out. While the city updates in Cata were
Did people like the city update? I feel that's like one of the most contentious points of this expansion. The fact that it revamped cities. It revamped zones, yeah, but it revamped cities. It revamped classical Orgrimmar into now this soulless metal place. I don't know. I think the metal just made it lose its luster.
great, they were more world building and in the background and are largely lost in the mechanics of WoW's gameplay. Of course, we appreciate them, but there are far more larger and cooler things added in Cata, so the city updates only land at number 9 on our list.
Okay.
And at number 8, we have another update, this time to every zone from vanilla. In part to allow old world flying, and in part to update leveling and lore, almost every single zone throughout both Eastern Kingdoms and Kalimdor was entirely revamped. This included new quests, new NPCs, and new
Dude, I leveled in Thousand Needles after it was flooded. It was so shit. It was... I don't remember when I played it, but I leveled in Thousand Needles for a bit after it was flooded. It wasn't good. It was a bad experience, okay? It wasn't horrible, but it was like, okay, it's like wasting my time, kind of not feeling it. There's like this boat you get, which is like, okay, I guess, but nah, man, nah.
flight paths. Additionally, Deathwing's edgy emo-ness radically altered the landscapes in some zones, such as Thousand Needles, and even split some zones up like the Barrens and the Cape of Stranglethorn. The sheer scope of such a task is not to be understated, and this effort was probably one of the biggest, if not the largest projects the WoW devs have ever done. In total, there were
I didn't level in the Barrens, but splitting up the Barrens is probably a good thing. Because the reality, the Barrens are just too big, okay? They're just literally too big. And the original Barrens were like this. Okay, so I'm gonna go to this pond, do a couple of quests here, run back. Go to this pond, do a couple of quests here, run back. Then I'm gonna go to the Harpies all the way up top, then run back. It was a lot of running, okay? It was a lot of running. The only place that had quests kind of relatively nearby in a decent fashion was pretty much just Booty Bay. And that's it. I honestly think that's kind of it.
36 zones which are updated in Cata, with 16 in Kalimdor and 20 in the Eastern Kingdoms. And all of this is, of course, in addition to the 5 new zones Cata added: Deepholm, Mount Hyjal, Tol Barad, Twilight Highlands, and Uldum. Additionally, don't forget Cata saw the introduction of goblins and worgens to the game.
Wait, Twilight Highlands was a new... Yeah, Twilight Highlands was a new zone. I never saw it. I saw Uldum.
So Cataclysm also added the city of Kazan, the Lost Isles, and Gilneas to the game. Overall, this was an insane undertaking, and the Old World revamp definitely deserves a spot on this list. And at number 7, we have the often forgotten Tabard reputation system, which was significantly expanded in Cataclysm. The Tabard slot had been in the game since vanilla, but its only real function was to show off the player's achievements. This switch to Rep Tabard started in Wrath, but was only for the Northrend factions. When equipped, these tabards let the player gain reputation while doing dungeons. Specifically, the player champions their cause according to the tooltip on the tabard. In Cataclysm, the old city tabards were updated and new tabards were added for the Cataclysm reps. Players no longer had to go to Northrend and complete the Argent tournament for rep tabards. Instead, players could go to the main city for whatever rep they wanted and just buy a tabard from vendors called quartermasters for a few silver.
Bro.
In Cata, there were 12 main rep tabards.
The fact that they actually need to mention this kind of means that there's not a lot of actually good things in the expansion, okay? Like, bruh, having all your tabards buyable in one place. What a time to be alive. What a change. Oh my lord.
Tabards for races and cities, with 6 for each of the base races that made up the factions at the time of Cata. For Alliance, there was the Exodar Tabard, which can be purchased in the Exodar, and the Stormwind Tabard, which can be purchased, unsurprisingly, from Stormwind. Both the Ironforge Tabard and Nomergon Tabards can be purchased in Ironforge, and both the Darnassus and Gilneas Tabards can be bought in Teldrassil. For Horde, the Undercity Tabard can be bought in Undercity, Silvermoon Tabard can be bought outside of Silvermoon, and the Thunderbluff Tabard can be bought in Thunderbluff. The other 3 tabards for Orgrimmar, Darkspear, and Bilgewater Cartel could all be bought atop the Central Plateau area in Orgrimmar. Not only were these tabards great for reaching max rep with older factions, but Blizzard also introduced them for the new factions in Cataclysm. We already mentioned Gilneas and the Bilgewater Cartel, but tabards were also added for the Guardians of Hyjal, the Earthen Ring, Therazane, Ramikon, and the Wildhammer Dragamon clans. Cataclysm
had... no, so it's just they added a bunch of tabards for everything. I mean, okay, but it's not really game-changing or anything. Most people probably didn't care.
The easiest way to get reputation in the history of the entire game. And it seems Blizzard thought it was simply too OP since they've never gone back to the tabard system of rep. What made this system so great is that it knocked out 2 birds with 1 stone. Players need to rep with factions, and they need to run dungeons to get better gear. However, the main reason this was the case back then and not today is because reputations didn't really matter that much. Nowadays, Blizzard tries to make reputations give actual useful rewards and go beyond Exalted, so being able to grind it infinitely in dungeons with a tabard doesn't really fit the current rep philosophy. And at number 6, we have interactive phasing. Interactive phasing is when open world and zone changes reflect the player's actions. Usually this happens after a major quest in a zone, but in the example we'll focus on the Molten Front. When players first arrive in the Molten Front offensive in the prequel to the Firelands Raise, it's barren and has few friendly NPCs there. However, over time as the player does dailies and activities, they help establish.
I don't know, I think this is going to be a hot take, but I think the zone phasing and whatnot actually destroyed the World of Warcraft because that was it. The zone phasing was the last thing that separated the new WoW from the old WoW, you know? I think zone phasing was pretty much it.
Establish a foothold and help Malfurion grow a tree. This tree starts out and then goes through phases and becomes a sapling and then grows larger and larger. Along the way, the players unlock new areas and quests in the Molten Front. More NPCs come and Druid army actually starts to form. While the Molten Front does have its fair share of problems, launching an all-out assault on Ragnaros and seeing the updates in the war campaign actually happen before your eyes is certainly what stuck with a lot of people. Gameplay-wise, it helps feel like the player is actually accomplishing something, and it significantly heightens the personal investment in the role-playing perspective, seeing a real impact the player's characters
Yeah, and it probably has never mattered since, honestly.
have cause in the world is not only its own reward, but it keeps the player engaged in a fun, creative way and not in a doled-out, drip-fed manner. While it may seem
Wait, that is a drip-fed manner, though. It is very drip-fed. Now a lot of problems are because of the zoning garbage. And, you know, the world changing because you do a certain type of quest. Like, Shadowlands beginning was horrible because of that. It was so boring, it was so lame. All because they want to create that immersive experience or whatever they want to call it. It was just meh.
minor, interactive phasing can also raise the stakes and storytelling within the game. For example, most Worgen players who leveled through Gilneas will probably remember that half the island slid into the sea, just after the player had spent several minutes questing through the area. Because of this new interactive phasing introduced in Cataclysm, it added a new depth to quest and immersion, and ultimately makes the player care more about the world. Speaking of the Molten Front, at number 5 we have the Firelands raid. This raid in particular was popular amongst the player base, as its final boss is Ragnaros. Ragnaros is one of WoW's most iconic villains, and this is the second time players defeat him, the first time being after he was banished from the Molten Core in Vanilla. We could spend an entire video discussing the unique boss encounters, tactics, and layouts of this raid, but most of that is beyond the scope of this video. We'll give a few examples of some of the more unique bosses, such as climbing the spider webs in the Beltalak encounter, or trying to even out DPS on Lord Rylith. Shanox is also one of the few summonable bosses in a raid in the entire game, as he only appears after clearing a certain amount of trash ads. Almost every boss in the entire raid is memorable, which is quite a feat indeed given how many instances there are in World of Warcraft. It speaks volumes that the time walking raid Blizzard introduced with Cataclysm time walking was the Firelands. Blizzard knew how much players like Firelands, and Dragonsoul is certainly a mixed bag. Blizzard could have also chosen Bastion of Twilight, but they knew most players were more fond of Firelands, and it's pretty easy to see why.
Yeah, they did. This is typical Blizzard. They did one thing good. It's like the Firelands transition, and I don't think the transition is good because it's good, most likely. It's good because it was the first time you saw it. But after that, Blizzard just gave you 50 other experiences exactly like that. Not unique in any way, and they're more of a chore than anything else, that people started to dislike it.
We've just barely scratched the surface of this raid in all of its unique moments and mechanics and lore and loots and mounts, but suffice to say that Firelands is pretty lit. And at number 4, we have all the new races and new race class combinations added in Cataclysm. Players certainly like to customize their character, and Cataclysm gave them many new options to do so. Of course, right off.
I mean, we're at the point in World of Warcraft, aren't we? Where every race can be any class. Honestly, at this point, worst case scenario, your race can't be like 2 classes or something like that. It's kind of pitiful. It's kind of boring, honestly.
Off the bat, most players will
There's
know
no
that 2 new playable races were added in the game in Cataclysm.
Like the Tauren, like the human is the same as the Tauren in the current World of Warcraft. Adding more playable things is, I don't think it's good. I don't think it's really that great.
Which are the Worgen for Alliance and Goblins for the Horde. When Cataclysm launched, Worgens could be played as Druid, Hunter, Mage, Priest, Rogue, Warlock, Warrior, and Death Knights. Goblins could play the same classes, but with the exception they could not play as Druids, but could play as Shamans. Many other race class combinations were also added in Cataclysm, which most players don't know. We'll start out with the Alliance. In Cataclysm, Dwarves were now allowed to be Mages, Shamans, and Warlocks. Priests, Gnomes, and Human Hunters were also introduced in Cata. For Horde, Orc Mages and Undead Hunters were added. Trolls got 2 new classes with Druids and Warlocks, and Taurens could be Paladins and Priests. And finally, Blood Elf Warriors were also added. While this may seem like a bit of a hodgepodge, Blizzard made it this easy to mostly preserve the balance amongst the classes of the 2 different factions. For instance, Worgen could be...
Again, it's like Blizzard... The way Blizzard preserves things in World of Warcraft through balance is literally an Excel spreadsheet. There's not a single Blizzard employee who actually plays the game, so all of that balancing gets done through Excel spreadsheets. And probably someone said, wait a minute, we don't have any information on this race doing this with this class. Isn't that a problem? And they said, yeah, and congratulations. Now your troll is literally the same as playing a goblin. How does that make you feel? Knowing that you picking a panda warrior is no different from a dwarf dwarf priest. It's stupid. It takes away from your uniqueness. And then someone yells champion at you constantly. Say it's time to save Azeroth. Bruv.
be druids, so now trolls could be druids to even it out. Goblin shamans were added, so dwarf shamans were added. Dwarf mages were added, so orc mages were added. You get the idea.
Stupid.
Overall, Cataclysm saw the most changes to the game's race class combinations, with 30 new race class combos being added. That's a lot of new animations and work and a large undertaking in of itself. The look and feel of the player's characters was much more customizable in Cataclysm, and so all the new race class combos take the fourth.
Imagine that, 10 times the customization, 10 times less the feeling of uniqueness.
Spot on this list. And at number 3, we have Reforging. Introducing Cata, players could talk to arcane reforges to modify a piece of gear's secondary stats. This allowed for much more customization suitable to the player's game style and helped alleviate needless RNG runs. Reforging an item costs the same amount as its sell value. There were 2 downsides to Reforging though. The first being that the 4 primary stats, agility, intellect, stamina, and strength, were not able to be reforged. The second is that no stats can be added to a piece that already had a secondary stat. That is, players could not double dip and gain 2 kinds of the same secondary stat. There were 8 secondary stats that could be reforged in Cataclysm, which included critical strike, dodge, expertise, haste, hit, mastery, parry, and spirit.
Is the reforge always lower? Because that's at least smart if they did it. Because, then you have a point in actually farming things with the correct stats.
Reforging was so useful, Blizzard even added a vendor and an arcane reforger on a mountain mist of Pandaria. Mystic Birdhat and the Grand Expedition Yak was originally an arcane reforger before it became a transmogrifier. Blizzard did eventually remove the reforge system entirely from the game Worlds of Draenor, but remnants of it can be seen in the missives used to customize secondary stats in the Shadowlands and Dragon Isle professions. One cannot understate the importance of gear in WoW. Being able to more finely tune gear to niche specializations was a fine addition to the game, and one that is sorely missed. Blizzard said the reason they removed reforging was because they wanted people to be able to use their gear as soon as they got it, instead of having to use a third-party program to calculate the best way to reforge your gear to get the perfect amount of hit and stat for every other secondary stat. So they vastly simplified stats in the next expansion, even removing most gem slots and enchants. And at number 2, we have Old World Flying. With the Old World revamp in Cataclysm came Old World Flying, making the vast expanseness of the Eastern Kingdoms and Kalimdor much easier and faster to navigate. As we briefly mentioned earlier, a ton of new flight paths were also added, making traveling certain parts of the zone from flight paths also much easier. This was incredibly helpful for getting around the world and worked seamlessly into making the new Cataclysm zones feel like a natural part of the continent. While there is some validity to the claim that Old World Flying reduced just how big the vanilla world felt, the usefulness of Old World Flying has so many effects that just overall make for a better experience for most players. Old World Flying made much of the old world more accessible for the average player and encouraged exploration. This, coupled alongside the new Cataclysm quests and updates to the zones, made many old world zones actually feel like completely different zones than their original vanilla iterations. That's not
I mean, that's theoretically true, but, at the same time, you kind of did lose the old zones forever.
Say that each zone was better after the Cataclysm zone revamp, just that overall, many were. Old World Flying fundamentally changed WoW in its vanilla design, and the overall player experience.
Yeah, Change the Thousand Needles don't seem popular. Yep. I didn't like it.
Experience was better for it, which is why it comes in at second place on our list. And finally, at number 1, we have transmogrification. Although it had its fair share of problems in Cata, T-Mog was added to the game in Cataclysm, and it forever changed the game in character customization and appearance. This is the 3rd system brought by the Ethereals, with the aforementioned Void Storage and Reforging being the other 2. Although it has undergone several changes since Cataclysm, even T-Mog in its infancy completely changed WoW. With transmogrification, players could now alter their gear's appearance to something more desirable and pleasing to them.
Okay, we know what's transmogging, so I guess that's pretty much it. But yeah, well, transmog. Who would have thought? Actual good system. Well, people had been begging for that all the time, so I guess this is just when they finished it, honestly, and then they obviously added to the new expansion. I guess it makes sense, but it's like Cata didn't create transmogs. A lot of things mentioned here are like, man, just puts into perspective how shitty Blizzard is, huh? It's like, man. Making classes and races feel less unique, introducing Firelands with the mechanic, and people liked it the first. I didn't play it again, but people liked it the first time. But it introduced so much bad things later on, because this is just gonna be rehashed for, well, literally this day, by the way, and it puts everything's on rails, and it's really, really boring and things like that. Interactive phasing. Oh yeah, this is the same thing. Well, Tabar drep. This is not even an update, honestly. This is not even a feature. Well, it is technically a feature. Everything here is technically a feature, but this is like, who cares, the feature. The old world got yeeted and deleted. City updates, which is kind of the same thing. I don't know. I think it's a little bit too cheap to say Cataclysm was actually that good. All of these things, I mean, some of them are good, but man, it doesn't. I don't think it hits the spot. Anyway, this was Quizzer said. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't done it, and have a nice day. Bye bye.